I'm going to talk about music, Fibonacci and the golden mean, but first I want to talk about rabbits. Here's a little puzzle for you proposed by Leonardo Bonacci in his 1202 book Liber Abaci, the Book of the Abacus. Bonacci's puzzle goes like this. If you put a pair of rabbits in a field and they give birth to a new pair of rabbits every month, and it took each new pair a month to reach adulthood, how many rabbits would you end up with after a year? Counting month by month, you get the following sequence starting with one pair of rabbits. After a month, they produce a pair of baby rabbits, so you've got 2 pairs. At the end of the second month, the original pair produced 2 more babies, so you end up with 3 pairs in total. After 3 months, the original rabbit couple produce another new pair of babies, whilst the oldest baby rabbits have now reached adulthood and given birth to their own first babies, giving 5 pairs. After 4 months, you've got 3 adult pairs and 2 baby pairs. After 5 months, you've got 5 adult pairs and 3 baby pairs. After 6 months, 8 adult pairs and 5 baby pairs, and so on like this. 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144. So the answer at the end of 1 year is a lot of rabbits. Now maybe this number sequence looks familiar. What Leonardo Bonacci, better known by his nickname Fibonacci, had uncovered with the help of his rabbits is the so-called Fibonacci sequence. You'll notice that each new term in the sequence is produced by adding together the 2 previous terms. 1 plus 2 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5, 3 plus 5 equals 8, and so on, giving the famous sequence of Fibonacci numbers. And it's not just rabbits, these numbers seem to appear everywhere in nature. In the number of petals on a plant, in the way a tree produces branches, in the whirl of a pine cone, in the growth of seashells, even in the flight paths of birds of prey. It's amazing to think that some of the most beautiful aspects of nature come through the application of the mathematics in the Fibonacci series. So this connection between mathematics and beauty has led musicologists to question whether music, that most mathematical of arts, could also have Fibonacci numbers hidden within it. Now there are all sorts of quite dubious theories you can find online about this, about how there are 13 chromatic notes in the octave, 8 white notes and 5 black notes, or how various Fibonacci ratios do generate musical intervals we recognise. But for me the most interesting area is how the proportions of the series have affected, whether consciously or not, the way a piece of music is composed and structured. There's a great example that's short enough to include in its entirety. It's the first of Chopin's Preludes, Opus 28 in C major. The piece is 34 bars long, with a climax at bar 21. The first major chromatic event is bar 13. And the opening statement lasts 8 bars, so 8, 13, 21, 34, a perfect Fibonacci sequence. Have a listen and judge for yourself whether these constitute audible events. Another plausible example is the first movement of Mozart's Sonata in C major, K279, which has 100 measures and whose main sections come at bar 62 and 38, very close to Fibonacci proportions. Now, no one's suggesting that Mozart or Chopin consciously worked with Fibonacci numbers, which weren't widely known about until the 1870s, but I think the most convincing aspect of the Chopin is the placement of the climax of the piece, which happens at a place known as the golden section, also known as the golden ratio or the golden mean. The golden section is the division that cuts a fixed length in such a way that the shorter portion bears the same ratio to the longer portion as the longer portion bears to the whole length. The actual ratio is about 1.618, often written as the Greek letter phi. Phi is intimately connected with Fibonacci, and you can see this in the maths. If you look at the ratio between successive numbers in the Fibonacci sequence, the higher up you go, the closer and closer they get to this golden ratio. Unlike the Fibonacci series, the golden ratio has been known about and studied since ancient Greek times. It represents a point on a line that's neither a third nor a half, and some argue that when a work of art or a building incorporates the ratio, it looks better, it looks more in proportion.
When I learned about this math ratio, it changed my life. Okay, so I'm going to explain in this video a math and design phenomena called the golden ratio. It's also referred to as phi. So what is the golden ratio? Well, to help explain it, I'm going to put out this sequence of numbers called the Fibonacci sequence, which is really just the golden ratio in a sequenced numeric form. Now, to arrive at this golden ratio sequence of numbers, we just need to follow a basic math formula. And I'm not a math person, so we're just going to keep this very simple. Okay, so you just start with 0 plus 1 equals 1. And now to get to the next number in the sequence, you take the sum of that simple equation and add it to the last number in the equation. So 1 plus 1 equals 2, and then 1 plus 2 equals 3. And it's around this point that the ratio actually starts showing up. And as we continue to do this formula, we start arriving at a set of numbers. So 2, 3, 5, 8. And you see what we're doing? We're adding the sum of the equation to the last number in the equation, and we arrive at this sequence of numbers. And it's interesting that this sequence and ratio actually remains consistent no matter how long you follow this mathematical formula. And so this sequence continues to expand outward around the rate and the ratio of 1 to 1.6. Now, to help give you an idea of what a 1 to 1.6 ratio is, compare it to a 1 to 1 ratio. So to make a 1 to 1.6 ratio, you just envision a little more than half of the initial line added to the line of the other side. All right, so this ratio of 1 to 1.6, and this is the ratio that's called the golden ratio, a 1 to 1.6 ratio. So this is what the golden ratio looks like as a rectangle, 1 to 1.6. And if we were to start making incremental golden ratio points within that, we can get an idea of what a spiral looks like when it expands outward at the same measured sequence. Now, this is all well and good, but what does that have to do with everyday life? Well, a lot actually. And that's because when we look to nature, we see that so many things flourish when they go to the golden ratio design and when they follow this sequence. Growing and expanding to the rate of the golden ratio spiral allows the maximum amount of rain to be directed down to the roots of many plants. And remarkably, when you study nature, you see the golden Fibonacci numbers like 3, 5, 8, 13, all of that again and again in the seed pattern spirals of plants, as well as in the number of petals. Next time you're bored and have a sunflower, try counting the number of seeds in the sunflower spiral, the golden ratio. Or maybe try something else with a spiral like a pine cone or pineapple. So we could spend all day counting the seeds of flowers and plants and fruit. I mean, you get the idea. But we don't just see this golden ratio sequence on a small scale. This ratio is the mathematical sequence in the spirals of our storms, tornadoes, hurricanes. These all spin in this golden sequence, 1 to 1.6. Even the waves can be measured using this ratio. But it doesn't stop there. Modern technology continues to be mystified by the far-reaching scope of the golden ratio, from the alignment of the planets to the spirals of our Milky Way galaxy, as well as the spirals of other ratios in planets. Now let's take this closer to home. I want you to hold out your arm and look at the distance between your shoulder and your elbow, and then from your elbow to your fingertips. Notice how your elbow, from your shoulder to your elbow is 1, and then from your elbow to your fingertips is 1.6. Pretty crazy, huh? But it doesn't stop there. Now take that further. The distance from your fingertips to your wrist is 1, and from your wrist to your elbow is 1.6. Keep it going. From the furthest tip of your finger to the bottom of your fingers is 1, and from the bottom of your fingers to your wrist is 1.6. Now check out the spacing of your knuckles, 1 to 1.6. Are you getting freaked out yet? Think about this. The head to your belly button, 1, and then belly button to your feet, 1.6. From your toes to your knees, and from your knees to your hips, golden ratio. Ever wonder why your two front teeth are so much bigger? Golden ratio. The pupils of your eyes, I mean, you name it, your whole body is the symphony of the golden ratio. In fact, as you are listening to this video, the sound waves are passing through your ear in a perfect golden spiral. Scientists have discovered that the golden ratio pattern is necessary for the human brain, the neural system, our sense organs, and our lung system. The golden ratio sequence is even in the helix of our DNA, and it forms the very rhythm of our heartbeat pattern. This is pretty amazing if you ask me. The universe is an incredible place. And to think that these beautiful intricacies of the world all hang on a stacked razor edge with the incomprehensible fine-tuning of all these precise constants and quantities which allow the universe to begin to exist. I mean, it's unfathomable. No wonder we are naturally bent to worship a higher creative power. I mean, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we live in a universe that is designed and hardwired to be life permitting. I mean, speaking of which, I think it's interesting that the golden ratio also comes up in the ancient biblical text. Scholars have noted that when you consider design measurements of things like Noah's Ark and the Ark of the Covenant, the golden ratio is an exact match to the measurements. Pretty interesting. Okay, so we've seen how the golden ratio is embedded into our life and even into our own heartbeat. So naturally, it's going to affect our aesthetics and the arts. It is believed that the Greeks used the golden ratio to achieve ideal acoustics, and many instruments are actually designed with the ratio. When you look at the amount of black keys and white keys on a piano, it should be no surprise that you see the golden ratio, and that's because the musical scales and notes align with the Fibonacci sequence. So scientists, mathematicians, and artisans have been aware of the golden ratio and have been incorporating it into their architectural and artistic designs throughout history. For some reason, designs tend to look better when composed and designed with the golden ratio. Look at iconic, ideal Greek temples like the Parthenon in Athens. You can see that they use the ratio again and again. Painters have also been incorporating the golden ratio into their artistic designs because it gives the composition a je ne sais quoi. Leonardo da Vinci was obsessed with it. So was Michelangelo. Even in the 20th century, you see ratios being used in painting, whether it be in the dimensions of the canvas or the placement of the focal point. And by the way, the golden ratio is one of the reasons artists don't like to line everything up in the center. But you don't have to go to Greece or to the Louvre to appreciate the golden ratio in human design. I mean, just look around your house or go to the grocery store. The golden ratio is used in product design, logos, and in branding all the time. It's a ratio that, for some reason, is pleasing on the eye, and it can be a great template for solving multiple design problems. I remember when I first started learning about the golden ratio, I began to see it everywhere. And it's really remarkable with how it comes up in nature and in the design world, and how artists can greatly improve their designs by using its sequence. So now that you know about this mysterious sequence that pops up again and again, now go out, and I want to challenge you to go and look and find places where you see this ratio. You don't necessarily have to take around a measuring stick, but take pictures and notice where you see this ratio come up in design and in nature, and I think you will be surprised. And perhaps even this newfound awareness, it might even change your life.
Let's draw a regular pentagon. As it is regular, all its sides are equal. this case, they are all equal to 1. If we join all 5 points in a different way, we get a 5-pointed star, called a pentagram. The pentagram can be found in many places. And in many symbols. And all its magic comes from the number 5. The pentagon sides measure 1. And the star sides measure
This week on Soundfield. Since the beginning of time, a series of numbers has inspired the world around us. This number can be seen almost anywhere you look. It's called the Golden Ratio, and you might have seen it before, but did you know that you can also hear it?
Have you ever noticed how some pieces of music just seem to make sense? The notes, the chords, phrases, the dynamics, and harmony, they can all feel like they were meant to go together. Well, many people believe that this isn't simply a coincidence, but part of a natural order to the universe, something called the Golden Ratio. To explain the Golden Ratio, we asked our friend Joe from It's Okay to Be Smart to fill us in.
The Golden Ratio is the irrational number phi, and like pi, it doesn't end. So instead of saying 1.61803398887 and so on, we'll just say phi. So what's interesting about phi? Take this golden rectangle. It's golden because the ratio between its sides match phi. If you cut a square off a golden rectangle, you create a smaller rectangle with the same golden proportions. And because this long irrational number made sense visually but couldn't be explained as a fraction, some ancient philosophers figured it must have a higher meaning. They called it the Golden Ratio, and later the Divine Proportion. Which brings us to something called the Fibonacci sequence. This pattern starts with 0, then each following number is the sum of the two before it. And what does that have to do with the Golden Ratio? Well, as the sequence goes higher, the ratio between the numbers gets closer and closer to 1.618, or phi. Many believe this sequence could explain growth in nature. If you connect each corner of the squares with an arc, you get a golden spiral. Look familiar? A lot of people see these golden spirals everywhere.
I didn't know anything about Golden Ratio. I'm just reading, trying to learn, like, okay.
In school, I learned it as, okay, a piece of music has a golden section, which is that point, that climactic. It doesn't always have to be dramatic, but just something special always happens. Music theorists have claimed to find the Golden Ratio in the works of many famous classical composers from Mozart to Debussy. Some say the Golden Ratio and the Fibonacci sequence are evident in Music for Strings, Percussion, and Celesta by Hungarian composer Bela Bartok. For example, the opening xylophone solo in the third movement has a rhythmic pattern following the Fibonacci sequence, going from 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and then back down 5, 3, 2, 1.
So Bartok, I think, was being accused of being really cerebral in his music. So he was pretty notoriously silent about his work. You don't see like notes in the margin with these little details, right? So a lot of people have said, well, look, if he was doing this and he was using Fibonacci and the Golden Ratio, why didn't he tell people, or why wasn't it more obvious?
Couldn't it just be that certain pieces that have that line up with the Golden Ratio stand out, and then music theorists gravitate towards that as an example?
Yes, absolutely. For example, the Celesta, that comes in at like bar 77 in the first movement, and that has nothing to do with Golden Ratio or Fibonacci. But the piece in the title is Celesta, right? So that's really important, right? So does that mean, we discount all the other stuff? I mean, I think you're right. You have to look at the big picture.
But then in your opinion, why should people care about the Golden Ratio?
Well, so what we haven't talked about is how it shows up in nature. So for example, if you go out and look at flowers and you start counting flower petals, most of the time you'll find a Fibonacci number. Think about if you were going to grow and plant lots of seeds on a flower, you wouldn't just want to equally spread them out. As you got further away from the center, there'd be too much space. Nature doesn't want that, right? Nature wants the sunflower to procreate, so the more seeds, the better. And it turns out the optimal angle of where they're arranging themselves is related to the Golden Ratio. So put that all together and you've got kind of a nice, beautiful, Mother Nature. What could be more beautiful than, mountains and flowers and streams, right? Perhaps that's why musicians have gravitated towards it in terms of if you're writing a piece of music and you have a climax in your piece, where are you going to put it? You're going to put it right in the middle? No, you're going to put it a little off center. So maybe you tend to gravitate towards something like a Golden Ratio.
The climax of Bartók's first movement happens at bar 55, which is not only a Fibonacci number, but also lands very close to the golden ratio. Music theorists call this a phi moment.
Bartók isn't the only composer to have a phi moment. Finding one is simple. Take the length of a song and then multiply it by 0.618, the inverse of phi. For example, take Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie. We have a total of 246 seconds times 0.618, which equals 152 seconds. Now listen to what happens at that exact moment. If you look hard enough, you'll start finding it everywhere. Check out Drake's In My Feelings. But were all these musicians writing songs with calculators by their side? I doubt it. Some say we find these golden moments because humans are just hardwired to find order in the world.
But sometimes the order of the Fibonacci sequence can be mesmerizing, like in this conical rhythm by B.C. Manjanath. Manjanath wrote this as a tribute piece after the death of his father, who had introduced the Fibonacci sequence to him as a teenager. This style of music is Carnatic music from southern India and is characterized by a very complex rhythmic system. Manjanath used the first 8 numbers of the Fibonacci sequence to compose the intricate rhythms in this piece. By the way, this is the phi moment of this video. I did write a piece using certain elements of the golden proportions and the Fibonacci numbers. Should I play it for you? It's really fresh, but okay.
Oh, you're gonna play it live? Oh, let's get it. Oh, I don't hear this, yes.
So what I did was I just came up with a little motive and then I fleshed it out until I felt like it could go somewhere. Something can change. Then I knew, okay, this is the golden section, and depending on the rules of the golden proportions, I know exactly how much time is required until the end. Okay, I'll stop right there. So obviously here, it changes, right? So I try to make it as obvious as possible. But that is at the point where 216th notes have passed. And the whole piece has 324 16th notes.
Okay.
So that point at 200
what if the
is
thing comes in,
the golden section or the phi moment.
Okay.
And this pattern, I use the Fibonacci numbers. So this has 5 16th notes, and then it goes to 8 16th notes, and then it goes to 13 16th notes, and then it goes back down. I don't know. So what was hard was it has to end by 324 16th notes, right? So it's like, how am I gonna end this? So I just bring back the pedal. So I just kind of try to evaporate it. But that was difficult about this because I was working with the structure.
Not right.
But
you are really the truth. You're really good at what you do.
Oh,
this is really tight.
Using this type of format, this type of structure, is another way of adding a limitation to what you're doing. Some sort of puzzle to work around. So I found it really stimulating.
People think of limitations and boundaries as negative words. However, when you are a creative and you have so many ideas coming to you, you kind of need those walls to create within.
Exactly. Okay. And it's so true. Just the template aspect of it is very, very valuable as a composer. Since you've heard it, can you help me turn it into a piece with perhaps some percussion or some drum sounds?
Yes.
Maybe something with clapping?
Yeah. I got some sounds. I got some stuff for that.
Okay.
I'm excited to dance to that first section though. I was digging the build up. I was digging that too. our mathematical composition. Comment below and don't forget to subscribe.